Sometimes it's those that are there to protect and serve that are actually the real monsters. Hello, true crimerers. This is the case of Anna Anton. Viewer discretion is advised. Anna Marie Anton was born on February 13th, 1952, and she was actually born in Washington, D.C. But eventually, she found her way in Milford, Iowa. She had been, raised by her grandparents. I don't really have a whole ton of background information on her, but I do know that her grandparents raised her. She had dropped out of high school at one point, but then she ended up going back to get her diploma. Then she would end up attending Estherville Junior College. When she was, a bit younger, she had experimented with drugs and stuff like that, but it never really took over her life, and it got to a point where she was able to kind of move past that. She had met a man named Tom, and the two of them, hit it off pretty quickly. They would end up getting married, but by September of 1986, Anna and Tom would end up divorcing. She claimed that Tom was a bad guy. He was abusive. He was involved with drug dealers, and so she needed to get away from all of that. That is what she told people. After the divorce, she would find herself in the little community or the town of Lyons, Nebraska. It was little back then, at least. She ends up moving into a house they called the Pink House because it was all pink. So she moves into the ground floor of this apartment building, and then there's a basement underneath where she could store, any of her belongings. The mayor of Lyons, her name was Mary Piper, she had met Anna Anton and said there really wasn't any reason why Anna should have ever even moved to this community of Lyons because there's nothing there. She thought it was strange that, this kind of younger woman would just pick up and move to this area by herself without really securing a job or anything. It was odd to the mayor and to some of the locals. She was unemployed at the time that this case occurred, but she was getting money through disability because she had gotten into a pretty serious crash that ended up causing her to lose mobility in her legs, and so she had to walk around with a cane, and she at that point was not able to really drive herself. And she would end up attending St. Joseph's Catholic Church there in Lyons, where she became quick friends with several people who went there, the parishioners. And the parishioners there were always there to help her. They would drive her from place to place. They would bring her groceries. They did a lot for her. They helped her a lot. One neighbor, a woman named Shirley Edgecombe, said that, she looked at Anna as this very deeply religious person. She seemed to come off as really sweet, kind, caring, nurturing, and just wanted the best for everyone. They had nothing negative to ever say about her. But Anna would confide in this neighbor, Shirley, about her husband, Tom, and said that her husband, Tom, had been a part of some big drug ring, and that Anna said she had to testify against her husband at trial, and now she's kind of afraid for her life because she doesn't know if her husband or anyone else from this drug ring are going to come after her. And she told Shirley, the reason why I specifically moved here to Lyons, is specifically to this particular building, this Pink House, is because she knew the upstairs tenant, a man named Greg Webb. Greg Webb was the chief of police in Lyons, Nebraska. Greg Webb was originally from Sioux City, Iowa, but then he eventually found his way out to Lyons, Nebraska, where he quickly became the chief of police, which really isn't saying a whole lot because at that time, they really only had, 2 or 3 total officers there. This was a town of about 1,200 people back then, and crime just never happened. They never needed to arrest anyone. In fact, they didn't even have jail cells there. But he was considered a well-respected, beloved member of the community. He would even help out in nearby cities and counties. When he was off of his work as police chief, he would go to other areas to kind of help their police forces. So he was looked at as this really good, honorable guy. He also had a previous relationship. He had been married to a woman named Karen, and they had a child together. At the time of this case, his child is 12 years old, but he and his wife Karen had divorced. And Anna had met Greg previously, like a few months prior to all of this. And I guess she found out through him that there is this vacant apartment on the ground floor of this pink house. And, if you needed it, it's there for you. And so that's eventually when she moved there. She told Shirley, the neighbor, so the reason why I came here is because there's a police chief above me and his police car is always parked out front. So if my, crazy husband Tom or anyone from his gang try to come there and do something to her, they're going to see a cop car and they're going to get freaked out and go away. And then one day Anna gave Shirley an envelope, and she said, if anything ever happens to me, I want you to open this envelope and I want you to call the number that's in it. It apparently belonged to a friend of Anna's in Iowa, and that, she would basically know what to do. That basically something happened to her, and that's the reason why you need this envelope, and my friends there in Iowa will be able to kind of go from there. She was also very paranoid. She would never open the door for anyone. She required them to announce themselves, and she needed to be able to see them out the window to even consider opening the door for them. This takes us to December 15th, 1986. It was the evening, and neighbors saw Anna being dropped off in front of her apartment building by a local there, and they saw Anna walk into her apartment, and that was the last time they ever saw her. The following day, December 16th, Shirley had already prearranged to get a couple groceries for Anna. So Shirley goes to get the groceries. She comes back to the house. She knocks on the door. Anna doesn't answer. She calls out for Anna. Doesn't answer. She waits a few more minutes. Bangs louder on the door. Nothing. She starts to tap on some of the windows. No response. Calling out her name. She's getting nowhere. Something feels off. But she ends up going back to her house across the street. She waits a few hours. She comes back over, knocks on the door, does the whole process all over again. But again, no response. And then that's when Shirley went to Greg Webb's apartment and said, hey, I haven't heard from Anna. Have you? He's like, no. All right, well, can you maybe let me into her apartment so I can make sure everything's okay? Greg had a spare key, I guess, to her apartment, to Anna's. So Greg and Shirley unlock the front door of Anna's apartment and they walk inside. They kind of expect that they're going to find Anna maybe unconscious. Maybe she fell and hurt herself somehow because she did have a hard time moving around. She needed a cane. Maybe she slipped and hit her head. But when they walked inside the apartment, they found no trace of her at all. The apartment itself was in relatively normal condition. Nothing seemed to be out of place. Nothing was stolen. There was no forced entry. It was all normal, except Anna wasn't there. When Shirley goes to her bedroom, she sees that Anna has an outfit laid out on the bed that, she would normally do that. So, and then she had her shoes, and her shoes were found on the floor of next to the bed. And, Shirley said that was very strange because if Anna wasn't there, why was she not in her shoes? All of her shoes were in the apartment that Shirley knew about. Why would she lay out a change of clothes on the bed and then not put them on if she was leaving the house? Things that were missing from the apartment, however, was Anna's purse. There was also a coat that Shirley remembered her having that was not there, and the cane was not there. And that's another reason why, Shirley was like, okay, her shoes are here, just thrown on the ground, sort of as if someone had dropped them there. And she went out with a coat, and she went out with a purse and her cane, but she didn't wear shoes. That's very odd. Shirley found an address book in Anna's apartment and said, hey, I can probably call some of these numbers, some of her friends, to see if, we can do something. But Greg instead said, you know what, give me the book, since it is my job as, police chief. I will call the numbers in there. A few hours go by, and Greg calls Shirley and says, I called all the numbers I could, but Anna wasn't with any of them, and none of them had heard from her. Greg then put out the idea, well, Anna does sometimes take these impromptu vacations or trips. And Shirley was like, not really, but okay. So Shirley says, well, we can't find Anna, so you're the chief of police. We need to file a missing persons report. And so I want to do that. Well, he told her, we'll wait a few more days. She is, a 30-year-old adult. She's allowed to go away on her own. Doesn't have to tell anyone anything. And we'll just sit here. We'll wait for her to show back up. By December 23rd, 1986, is when he finally said, okay, let's report her missing. On December 27th, 1986, 11 days after Anna vanished, the nude, frozen body of a woman was found in a desolate field. It was really kind of just, a few feet off the side of this road. Very rural road, doesn't really have a lot of like buildings next to it. It's very isolated and very desolate. Not a lot of people really are out there. But some local farmers came across this body in this field. So they contacted, obviously, the police. When they arrived, they confirmed that this is the body of a young woman, and she had been shot to death. She had 2 gunshot wounds to her stomach by a .38 caliber Smith & Wesson revolver. Now, this is about 20 miles away from Lyons, from where Anna was last seen alive. Now, and her body was technically found on the Winnipeg reservation, so that created a whole lot of jurisdictional issues. When Greg Webb found out about this body being discovered, he would go out to the scene and he would confirm that this was, in fact, the body of Anna Anton. The detectives at the scene would take note that there was no blood that pooled like underneath her head. There was no blood found on the actual ground or the leaves and, grass and all that. And so they believe that Anna was actually killed somewhere else, and this is just where they dumped her. Nebraska State Patrol was called in to basically investigate this case because of all of the jurisdictional issues. They also, the coroner and the detectives who actually saw her body there in the field, but they would all make note that Anna was extremely clean. Someone had washed her entire body. It appeared that someone had taken water and showered over her entire body, getting rid of everything. And that's by someone who knows to do that. They believe that whoever did this did that with the intent of getting rid of any physical evidence of themselves on the body. So Shirley, the neighbor, tells police about this envelope that Anna gave her. And basically the police would look into this phone number in there about a person in Iowa. And they came to the conclusion that Anna basically was going to imply that Tom, if something happened to her ex-husband Tom, is the one who made it happen. Because again, she had told everyone that Tom was basically a drug lord involved in the drug trafficking rings, and he was a big, scary guy. When police tracked down Tom, he isn't in prison, and when they ask Tom and his relatives and family and friends and all that about this drug stuff, he's like, what? People were like, Tom is very quiet, he's patient, he's a very sweet guy, he's a nurturing type guy, he loved Anna, he's not involved in drugs at all. As a matter of fact, police found no proof or evidence that he had anything to do with the drug world. And, he wasn't abusive towards Anna, at least that nobody knows. And pretty much everyone was saying good things about him. And they were able to determine that his alibi at the time the murder would have happened, they confirmed it without a shadow of a doubt. Tom had nothing to do with this. But for some reason, Anna had lied about who Tom was and what he's capable of. He wasn't any of the things that she said he was. There are some people from Anna's life who said that, these were clearly delusions that Anna had, that perhaps, mentally speaking, she may not have been all that there, but also wasn't being treated for anything. So at one point, all of these officers involved in this murder case now, they meet at a local diner to kind of go over each other's notes. And at that diner is Greg Webb, the cop neighbor who lived upstairs. And he was basically injecting himself into this investigation, despite the fact that it was out of his jurisdiction at that point. Well, one of the chief detectives in this looked at Greg and said, hey, you lived above her. Do you know her? He's like, yeah, we met a few months ago. I'm the one who helped her get this apartment. Then they ask him, well, have you ever had sexual relations with her? He says, no, absolutely not. Then the detective looked at him and sort of saw something in Greg's face. And he asked him one more time. He's like, Greg, have you ever had sex with Anna Anton? Greg then changes his tune and says, okay, fine, yes. The night she moved in, we had sex. At that point, all of the other detectives and officers that were there kindly asked Greg to get up and leave the restaurant because now he may be a suspect. When they kind of unearthed that comment from Greg, their wheels began to turn. They're like, wait a minute. The body was found on a Native American, like on a reservation. And a police officer might know to do that on purpose, to create a jurisdictional nightmare. Her body was cleaned from head to toe, spotless. No physical evidence found on her body. A detective or a police chief or anything like that involved in law enforcement would know that's something that you should do. So at that point, he is now considered a suspect directly, but they need proof. They go to Anna's apartment and they use luminol. They spray all over the place, and they do in fact find traces of blood drops throughout her apartment. The blood drops would then lead out of her apartment and up a flight of stairs that actually ends up going directly to Greg Webb's apartment. They take swabs of all of these potential blood samples. They confirm presumptively that it is blood. Then they compare the blood DNA to blood type that they believed was Anna's blood type, and they can confirm that the blood type, Anna's blood type, matched the blood type of these blood drops throughout the apartments leading up to Greg's apartment. So at that point, because the blood did go up there, they did get a warrant to search Greg Webb's apartment. At that point, Greg fled the area. They found out he traded in his 1971 Mercury Cougar to some used car shop. He then goes to a travel agency where he purchases tickets to go to Belize or Costa Rica. He's trying to pick his way out of the country to go to. On December 30th, they found out he withdrew his entire savings, every ounce, every penny he had in his accounts. He drained it, and then he vanished. He was apparently spotted at one point by the mayor of Lyons. And she goes, "Hey, what's going on?" He's like, I'm just going away for a few days. I need to kind of get away from everything, taking a few days off. But then she never saw him again. But they are still able to enter Greg's apartment because they have the warrant to do so. They find a mop that had been recently used, and that mop had traces of blood on it. And again, it was the same blood type that was Anna's blood type. They also found traces of blood in the trunk of his police car because he had obviously left that back at home. They didn't find any sign of a struggle in Anna's apartment or in Greg's apartment, but that means he could have just cleaned it up. From their investigation, they discovered through talking to people that Anna was kind of infatuated with Greg. He liked her, she liked him. They had a sexual relationship at some point, whether it be one time or multiple times, it's not really known. And Anna was convinced that she was going to start dating Greg and maybe, hey, one day we'll get married. But then she heard him in his apartment one night having sex with another woman. She thought he was going to be exclusive with her, but the neighbor Shirley said that it really it infuriated Anna a lot to a point where she actually observed Anna get holy water, and she sprinkled that holy water from the steps leading from her apartment to his. She just kept splashing it. So when they found that out, they were like, okay, it's there must have been some kind of incident or argument between these two, because they were clearly on two different pages. They did find out that on the night that Anna would have disappeared, they can confirm through witnesses that Greg Webb was very intoxicated that night. They think that he had entered either her apartment or she entered his, where she started to argue with him with regards to these other women. An argument broke out and he ended up shooting her in the abdomen twice. There would be at least one witness who stated they saw Greg carrying a large bag of something from his apartment and seeing him put that thing into the trunk of his police cruiser and then driving away. It was the perfect size of a body. And so they believe that was, in fact, him taking Anna's body out and bringing her to where she was found. He knew to carefully wash her body, remove her clothing, and he knew to dispose of her body in a location that would create a police nightmare. He thought he was doing all that by committing the perfect crime, the perfect murder. But I don't think he realized that those things would make him an obvious suspect. He was also banking on this fact that the ex-husband, Tom, was going to be a viable suspect because it sounds like he believed what Anna told him about him, which turned out not to be true. But, Greg has already fled. And so an arrest warrant is issued in January of 1987 for his arrest, and he is being charged with first-degree murder. They did find out that he had purchased a ticket to go to Belize in Central America. They just don't, and someone used it. They just don't know if it was him who used it. So at that point, once he may have potentially fled the country, the FBI becomes involved. The mayor of Lyons would, tell the investigators, Greg was a good cop. He was respected here in this community. He was very professional, very knowledgeable, very smart. He was he was not like, an asshole cop or anything. And that this is not like him. And so there were people who believed that, multiple theories, that one, Greg fled because he didn't want to be wrongly accused of this, because that's happened obviously many, many times in history. He didn't want to go to jail for something he didn't do. They also thought, one theory is maybe he fled because he knows who the real killer is, and that killer is going to come after him. Another theory was floated out there that perhaps he was protecting the actual killer. But these are all theories. These are all, who knows it is. They had another suspect named Tony Sears, who was a mutual friend of Anna and Greg, and he was apparently seen at the apartment the day she would have disappeared. But they also would later confirm that he had an alibi, and he was nowhere near the scene when the actual murder would have likely happened, and he wasn't the guy. People had seen Greg wavering a .38 Smith & Wesson around, which was actually the murder weapon of Anna. And so it all points to him. He's trying to get away. He's trying to throw the blame on other people. It all points to him being guilty of this. But where the fudge is he? That's the question. So this story airs on Unsolved Mysteries. It airs on America's Most Wanted. It's plastered on the news stations all across the entire country. Even other countries are sharing this story, that because, like Belize and stuff, because maybe he might still be there. But on February 17th, 1993, a man named John Barrington was watching Unsolved Mysteries in Orlando, Florida. And when he saw Greg's image pop up on the screen, he's like, holy shit. That is my coworker, Gregory Webber. Wow. Way to really sneak that one in. Gregory Webber instead of Greg Webb. Man, what a master of disguise there. But he was a construction worker working with this tipster. And he was like, yeah, that's him. That's 100% him. He recognized him right from the get-go. And so he contacted the police. He contacted the Unsolved Mysteries and America's Most Wanted hotlines just to make sure. So he ends up taking, I guess they have records of the ID that Greg Webber used to get his job at the construction place in Florida. So that company, they faxed over the image of that license, and they were like, yep, that's him. That is Greg Webb. On February 23rd, police arrive to the construction site in Orlando, Florida. They find Greg Webb, and they arrest him and say, you are being charged with first-degree murder. Greg would tell the police that while I was on the run, I was in places like Belize, Honduras, Guatemala, Nicaragua. He always tried to find work while he was there, but he never could. And so he found his way back to the States, where he went to Florida and found himself a job working construction. At a pretrial hearing, someone would testify, another officer testified that Greg had told this other officer that he found Anna's body on his kitchen floor. And he looked at her and realized that she had been shot. And he, checks his .38 caliber and notices that there are a couple of bullets missing. And so he decided then that I need to make it look like she disappeared, because I don't want to get in trouble for this. I didn't do this, but I can't get in trouble for it. And so he did all the stuff of cleaning her body, putting her to the trunk, and bringing her to the field. He told this officer that he and Anna had been drinking very heavily the night prior. They got really, really drunk, and he doesn't really remember anything. He said he noticed that he had blood on his hands, his neck, his arms, everywhere, and he was having a really hard time getting all the blood off. And so he's now saying at this point, oh, I don't know if I did it, but if I did, I don't remember doing it. I had to black out. I was so drunk. And because they did not have physical proof to show how exactly what happened that night, they had no proof that he premeditated this. They had no proof that they had virtually very little physical evidence. And because they could not confirm why he did this, how he did this, what was the motivation behind all of it, if it was pre-planned or not, all they can really do was agree to let him plead guilty to manslaughter. And that's what he did in 1994. And for that manslaughter charge, he was sentenced to 8 to 19 years in prison. He always maintained his innocence, though, despite never offering anyone else up as a suspect, despite him literally telling another officer, I saw her dead on my kitchen floor, blood on my hands, my arms. My gun was missing 2 bullets that turned out to be the bullets that shot her. I don't remember anything. I blacked out. It's obviously he knows he did it. He did try to suggest, well, maybe this girlfriend that I was seeing at the time, maybe it was a jilted ex, broke into the apartment and saw I was talking to her and wanted to take Anna out. But anyway, he was convicted and he was sentenced to prison, and by August of 2002, Greg Webb was released from prison on parole, and he only served 8 years. And the apartment building they once lived in, where all of this happened, had since been demolished. 8 years for killing someone. You know, it sucks that we have these, at times we have these burdens of proof, you know, like, you know he did it, you know he killed her, but you can't prove that it wasn't done in, like, the heat of the moment. And because of that, you know, you can only sentence him to so much time, because that's the law. It sucks. Like, if you take a life, it should, you know, there should be a much more a longer sentence for it, but you have to prove the reasons and the motivations behind it. And they couldn't say that. They couldn't say that he intended to kill her that night. They had no way of proving that. And so, you know, the justice system is not exactly always something we like. We'll disagree with it all the time, but the justice system is the justice system. The law is the law. And unfortunately, a guy got a slap on the wrist for killing an innocent woman. And so I guess you can say that Anna Anton kind of, sort of got the justice she rightfully deserved. But that is it for this case, True Crime, a Rooney Dooney Dingleberry Dongs. I hope you found it interesting. As usual, please subscribe to the channel. If you're new here, hello, my name is Mike. I tell true crime stories, obviously. So please subscribe, leave a comment below, hit the like button so that more people can see the video. Please hit the bell to be notified of when I post new videos, which is multiple times a week. And I also tell short form true crime stories over on TikTok. The link to my TikTok is in the link tree, which is in the description of this video below. So yeah, feel free to follow that TikTok page if you like. In that link tree, you're also going to find my case list, which is now at 7,000 names long. And so I pick my cases normally at random. So if you don't see a name on that list that you want me to cover, send me an email, which is also listed below. Just the name of the case, where it happened, when it happened. I'll add it to my list. Again, I choose them at random. But if you are a loved one to a missing person or a murdered individual who has still not gotten justice yet, and you want me to talk about their case, just let me know in the email that you're a loved one, and I can make that a top priority. That's all. But other than that, that is it for this video, True Crime Roonies. So until the next case, ta-ta for now.